Give me a few moments to try and sort out technical things.
Barbara, you remember that message that I sent you about one of the teachers in Weatherford?
Yes, I do. Hang on. I'm lifting up my computer because I've got it a little bit too low. Hang on.
Okay.
Right, hey, I remember. Yes.
Yeah. So it was a frustrating situation because I thought we might really have something there. Apparently, there was a teacher that was a former coach and was teaching a class on zoology, which for many students would be the one and only that they would ever understand what evolution really is, about how it is an effect of biodiversity rather than one thing turning into something else. Mm-hmm. And it's a rare opportunity to explain evolution in the proper context, which most people just don't get. And apparently this one person decided that it was necessary to instead bring in the controversy, as if students living in Texas would not be aware of the creationist arguments. He brings in a creationist counterpoint written by Ann Coulter and has a mock debate. Now,
Ann Coulter?
Yes. And it was enormously frustrating to me that someone would present a debate like this and then not clarify that these points are not supported by science, or that he professes to believe in evolution, yet he presents these counter arguments from Ann Coulter in a mock debate style. He's since recanted on that, has apologized to the students, and has stated all of this was a joke. I failed to see the humor in that. I didn't understand how it was presented. I wanted to see something. I wanted to actually bring this guy on the show and have him explain himself. But somebody wrote to me concerned that they were paying for their student to take this class, that they were expected to learn zoology, and were instead learning the philosophies of Ann Coulter and the creationist arguments and the claims made by the Discovery Network and or the Discovery Institute. And so this teacher says, what do we do about this? And I suggested that you don't have any accusations. Just write back, did you clarify that this point were not supported by science? Did you actually present these arguments as if they might be valid to a student of zoology, to a classroom full of zoology students? And then I asked the parent to include in his email carbon copies to yourself, to Eugenie Scott, to Texas Citizens for Science, for the Texas Freedom Network, myself, a couple of other names like that. And don't do it as a blind carbon copy. I wanted the teacher to make sure that he saw everyone else that had been copied in that email. And the only thing I wanted was a confirmation. Did you really say this to your class, as if any of it might be true? What turned out was apparently something of a debacle. I wish I could have orchestrated this myself. I think it would have been great fun. But what I did get was that the teacher involved has recanted on the position, is not going to support or defend it. But I never got confirmation as to whether he presented these arguments as if they might be valid. For all I know, he stated to the class that there was never any such thing as a transitional species and never corrected that statement. And I wanted a position or a situation where we could force an admission of that kind. Because I wanted an example, because we have a lot of teachers here in Texas who use their position, and I'm certainly not talking about all teachers, there are plenty of good teachers, but we have a lot of teachers in Texas who use their position as a means of promoting their political agenda, and this includes people in the Tea Party. And people who seem to be undermining their own are people here in Dallas who are teaching science and supporting agendas and political alliances which will leave them jobless if everything comes to fruition as planned. I don't understand this. And I very much want to raise public awareness and completely attack this kind of mindset, this kind of philosophy, and this kind of misuse of the educational system.
Well, regardless of, I don't know, of course, I'm so far removed from the situation. I don't know all the facts, but let's just assume that the teacher did bring in information and introduce it as coming from Ann Coulter. No responsible teacher in his right mind would do that. I mean, honestly, whether it was a joke or whether the teacher's a closet creationist, no self-respecting instructor should bring in any material written by Ann Coulter into any classroom, especially an intro zoology classroom where there are people there to learn real science. I mean, I don't know the situation, but if the teacher did that, I think the teacher doesn't belong in that classroom.
Well, again, in his defense, he did apologize, he did recant, and I never got admission as to the sincerity of his attempt, what exactly he did. So I can't condemn him, beyond the speculation that you and I just did. That's about as far as we can go with that.
Well, an apology is appropriate.
And I owe you both an apology. I'm sorry, I was trying to multitask and I failed to introduce both of you appropriately. Welcome to the show, Aronra, the Texan Tank. I don't think anyone here really needs to be introduced to him. Barbara Forrest, the professor of philosophy at Louisiana South University and
Southeastern Louisiana.
Southeastern. I had it written down somewhere, but I haven't got my reading glasses on. Old age is a terrible thing. Also, member of the board of directors of the National Centre for Science. Now, is it science and education, or is it science education?
No, science education.
Yeah.
National Center for Science Education.
You see, I was worried because I saw a video that Thunderfoot put out, and he referred to it as the National Centre for Science and Education, and I suddenly thought, oh, lordy, I've been getting it wrong all this time. But it's him that's wrong. I'll have to pick up on that. Barbara, every philosopher I have on the programme, for reasons which I won't bore you with, I am asking them all to please just answer this simple question in as long or short form as you like. What is your definition of philosophy?
My definition of philosophy, oh gosh, I'll tell you how I explain it to my classes. I don't like the standard definition that intro students, at least when I was starting out in my study of philosophy, used to hear. It's the study of man and his relationship to the universe. I don't like that at all. It doesn't tell people anything. So the way I approach this with my students is to say, well, it's the study of ideas. Every action begins with an idea. It can be a very good idea or a very bad idea, but it also begins with questions. And philosophy is interested in basic questions that people have always asked because they're important. How do I understand the universe? What's the right and wrong way for me to behave? And I also differentiate philosophy from other subjects such as psychology and anthropology. So first and foremost, I think the study of philosophy is about the ideas behind actions and behind our understanding of the world.
Would it be fair to say, because this is a conversation, Aaron, there's a bit of background noise. Can you just mute your microphone if you're not speaking? Sorry.
You're to me or to...
No, there's background noise, I think, coming from Aaron, if he can mute his microphone when he's not speaking. Yeah. No, you're not. You haven't muted your microphone, Aaron. Aaron, can you mute your microphone?
No, it's a technological thing, and it's beyond my ability.
Okay, well, we have to deal with the background noise. Oh, there we go. One of the things that I have stated is that I am very much open to be corrected in this. Obviously, philosophy and science went hand in hand for many years. I mean, science was natural philosophy. A couple of hundred years ago, it sort of like separated off into different fields. And the way I would distinguish philosophy from science is that science deals with testable evidence, whereas philosophy tends not to do that. And I'm not being disrespectful of philosophy on that basis. But if philosophy were to be in a position to come up with factual statements or evidential statements, then would it not by definition leave the realm of philosophy and move into the realm of science? Or am I being too simplistic?
Oh, well, philosophy in the beginning was interested in the early Greek philosophers, the pre-Socratics, were interested in the same thing that scientists are interested in today, the nature of the cosmos, the nature of the physical cosmos. And so they raised the questions about it and that concerned them. For example, what is the basic substance of the cosmos? And they went about trying to answer those questions through the use of the only two tools they had, reason and observation. And they were asking very basic questions. But eventually, philosophical concerns differentiated out into other areas that became science because their questions were discovered to have answers. For example, what are things made of? Well, now science has answered that question. Science has taken actually a good deal of philosophers' turf away from them, and I'm not complaining about that at all. I'd much rather have answers than questions. But philosophers are, they've had to give up some of their turf, that's correct, to science. And in a way, I think philosophy has been forced to change. But the analytic techniques that philosophers use, the analysis of, let's say, ideas, checking positions for logical consistency, those are things that philosophers can contribute. But I think I agree with Sidney Hook, who was my philosophical mentor. I think philosophers today, what they have to contribute most is social critique and social analysis and using their training and their skills to help clarify issues in the specific disciplines that have come out of philosophy. And so we get philosophy of science, we get philosophy of law. So I'm not upset that philosophers have had to give up a lot of turf.
No, I'm not upset at all. Now, I must make it clear that for those watching, you may have looked at the schedule and seen that Eugenie Scott was listed to appear during this part of the programme. Unfortunately, due to her very busy itinerary, she cannot appear live. But what we were able to do a few weeks ago, as I'm sure Barbara will remember, is to do a pre-recorded interview with both Barbara and Eugenie. And I'm hoping that the Tony behind the scenes is ready to play that video. I think it's fun in a way because I don't think that either Barbara or Eugenie had been quite so insulted by the opening question in the interview. But it's also a giggle because you get to see me being totally bitch slapped by Eugenie halfway through it. So, shall we play that? And hopefully Tony will be able to do that for us in a few moments. And then we'll see. I think it's about 10 minutes and then we'll come back live. And for those, just before you press the play button, Tony, you'll appreciate during the course of the video clip you're about to see, I do leave Barbara almost to one side, so to speak, because I knew that she was going to be here live. So I concentrate with Eugenie, but we will be coming back for Eugenie to pick up at the end of this. Sorry, Barbara to pick up at the end of this. Tony, over to you. Let's see what happened when DPR met Eugenie and Barbara. It's a great pleasure to welcome to the show Eugenie Scott, the head of the National Centre of Science Education, and Professor Barbara Forrest from the Southeastern Louisiana University. It's particularly good because I have two women on the show, and I have been criticised in the past for not having enough women involved in this event, and those women that I have had on I've treated in some sort of condescending or patronising or sometimes outright sexist way. With that in mind, my first question to you, both you feisty young fillies, which do you prefer, cooking, cleaning or ironing? Barbara.
Well, down south we learned to do all three.
I should hope so.
yes, as Eugenie says, at the same time. But if I had to choose one of the three, I think the thing I most like to do is iron, because I can set up my computer and watch the news while I'm ironing. So I do all three happily, but I'm also a nerd.
But what I don't understand is why a woman would be interested in current affairs and the news.
Because we have to do something besides cook and clean and iron.
Okay. Eugenie, your favorite?
Oh, well, obviously I have. As a Californian, I do all of them at one time, simultaneously and with great efficiency, because it's so important for me to get out there and be demonstrating against whatever the latest outrage from the city government is. I live in Berkeley. Of course, this is what we do every day.
Of course. On a more serious note, I like to think that the audience I get is going to be educated and intellectual, but there may be some that are not familiar with what the National Centre for Science Education does. Could you just give us a brief outline of the work that you do?
Certainly. We monitor the creationism and evolution controversy and work very hard at the grassroots level to help teachers and school board members and parents to keep good science in the classroom. We oppose the teaching of religious views as science, and so we object when various forms of creationism are presented as science and are pushed to be taught along with evolution in the public schools.
The question of teaching of creationism in the classroom is one that sort of puzzles me to a degree, because let's face it, it could be taught in 30 seconds. You know, about 6,000 years ago, God did it. He created everything just as we see it now. So what's the big problem with it?
Well, see, the problem with that is that's only one creationist view. In fact, it's only one view even within Christianity. If you were a teacher in a public school and presented that as, okay, now we'll have the lesson on creationism, all the Catholic kids would raise their hands and say, well, no, that's not what we learned. And it would be even worse if you were teaching this in, say, Arizona, where the Hopi kids would raise their hands and say, no, that's not what we learned. So the problem with teaching creationism along with something like evolution that's a science is that well, a number of problems, but the first one, which you brought up, is that there's so many different creationist views that would have to be taught that there simply is no time for it. And of course, obviously, the major reason for objecting to it is that none of these views are science, even though some of the Christian creationists have claimed that there is scientific warrant for their views.
I know that each year the NCSE takes a trip down the Colorado, during the course of which there is a scientific explanation given by a geologist as to its formation, but you actually take on the role of giving the creationist side. What is the creationist side?
Grand Canyon was laid down by the receding waters of Noah's flood, in the sense that the approximately 4,000 feet of sediment that make up Grand Canyon all were deposited during a period of about a year, because, of course, the flood lasted for about a year. And then, according to their model, the actual canyon itself was cut catastrophically by a large release of water north of Grand Canyon in Colorado, which catastrophically cut the Grand Canyon in a period of about a week. So, indeed, my discussion is somewhat shorter than that of the geologist. It doesn't take me quite as long to get through the full explanation for how these 4,000 feet of sediment got there through all the various time periods. But we have a very good time. And I certainly would encourage anybody who wants to see this fabulous geological feature to come with us. We have a better time than most Grand Canyon tours.
Now, I might be a little bit stupid here, and I may not be getting a point, but you know, we've got.
Now, you paused for us to contradict you, and we were very rude not to.
You were.
No,
I was waiting.
DPR, no, DPR, you're not stupid. Okay, let's go on. You might be ignorant. You might be ignorant, but you're not stupid. How's that for a distinction?
Well, I'm certainly very ignorant. The Earth is round. It's covered with water, and according to the Bible, the waters start to subside. So how is it that we end up with a reservoir above the Grand Canyon that hasn't subsided? And where did all this water go? This is what I'm not understanding.
Well, the creationists have actually done some very careful calculations about, given the surface of this sphere upon which we live, given the surface of the earth, how much water would be necessary to cover, as it says in the Bible, which, remember, they interpret literally, cover the tallest mountain to a depth of 100 feet. Now, if the tallest mountain is Everest, that is one heck of a lot of water. So one of the adjustments that the creationist flood model make is that, in fact, Everest and the other very tall mountains that we see in the Himalayas or the Rockies or any place else were actually much lower at the time. There was a great deal of mountain building that took place after the flood. But at the time of Noah, the tallest mountain was really only a couple hundred feet tall. So this reduces the total amount of water necessary to inundate the entire planet. You're following this carefully, I can see that.
I'm following it so far.
Good.
That means there's got to be a lot of tectonic movement in the last 4,000 years.
Well, yes, that's certainly true, but we'll talk about continental drift a little bit later on if you so choose to do so. So where did the water come from? Well, the Bible says the water came from the waters above the firmament being a metal dome that covers the surface of the earth. And the waters above the firmament, of course, are the source of normal rain, but then it's also the source of the 40 days and 40 nights of rain that came to bring the waters of the flood. But there also is another source of water, and that is water from below the firmament. This is interpreted by creation science aficionados as referring to subterranean reservoirs of water that broke through the mid-oceanic rifts to burst forth to provide an underwater as well as a rain source of water. Now, these two sources of water provided enough water to cover the entire planet to a depth of 100 feet over the tallest mountains, which of course weren't that tall in the first place. Your next question was, where did the water go to?
Well, before that, because I've heard some people advance a theory that the water jets from the mid-Atlantic ridges actually were ejected with such force that some of the water actually reached the moon, and there is evidence of marine life on the moon.
Well, now that's just plain silly.
It came from a creationist. What else do you expect it to be? But I'm sorry, yes, where did the waters go to?
Actually, there's a disagreement among creationist model developers about that. I mean, some feel that is really not a very good explanation. The craters on the moon are formed by meteorites and so forth. But yeah, I mean, look, stepping aside, taking off my creationist hat for a moment here, there's a lot of really zany stuff out here in the creationist literature, which actually makes it rather fun for those of us who are creation evolution nerds to study. But where did the water go, you ask, reasonably enough? The water subsided after the flood event occurred. Noah and the occupants of the ark floated along for close to a year, and during that period of time, the floodwaters were slowly receding. Now, where did they go? They went into those oceanic basins, which now were opened up. They had not previously been opened up. The surface of the planet was fairly regular before the flood, but because of the ripping apart of the surface of the earth to provide for the release of the waters below the firmament, this also created the modern day ocean basins into which the water from the flood flowed. So there was this great drainage that took place during the year after the 40 days and 40 nights of rain. You are looking perplexed.
I am, and I have to say that even with such a wonderful delivery as that, it still makes no sense to me. So I remain confused. Barbara, what do you make of it? There we go. If you're going to get bitch slapped by someone, there is no one better than Eugenie Scott to bitch slap you. Yeah, I was put in my place. But we left it off at the point where I was just asking Barbara the question, and the reason I did that is because we obviously have Barbara live. Barbara, I think I was asking you, what is your view on this whole idea? What are your observations about it?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to refresh me, DPR. Which idea?
The idea of the global flood and the water subsiding and the water ejaculating out of the mid-Atlantic ridges and hitting the moon, and the Grand Canyon being formed in 5 minutes. It's a basic creationist idea, and that's the thing. I can't be specific because they aren't.
I just think that the whole idea of that is a god-awful bore. It's just, I don't spend any of my time thinking about that stuff. So I just think that it's a sad waste of time, actually.
Well, it's one of many sad wastes of time, as far as I'm concerned. And there is another issue that I know we discussed during the course of the pre-recorded show, which hasn't been shown, which is another aspect. And this was a question that I asked you in relation to Aaron, microphone.
What?
Microphone, mute it. We can hear you typing.
Oh, you're such a whiny.
Thank you. And it sort of like goes back to the issue about whether philosophy can provide evidence. And I know that I asked you during the course of the recording that we did, particularly in relation to God, whether, and the statement that I referred you to was one that was quoted to me, you're not going to find evidence of God in a science lab. So if you're looking for evidence of God, you're going to have to go into the field of philosophy.
No, philosophy provides no evidence of God. The question of God's existence is a factual question. First, you have to define what you're talking about, right? And the idea of God, although as I've been reading lately, I've been reading about the cognitive science of religion. I listened to your earlier conversation. That was fascinating. That the belief in the supernatural is universal, but the idea of the Western God is not. But the whole question of whether there is such a God is a factual question. And for factual questions, you need the right kind of evidence. To know whether something exists or not, you have to have empirical evidence, or you can't answer the question. And I think David Hume, really addressed this beautifully. If you ask a factual question, you need factual evidence. And philosophy does not provide any kind of evidence that there is such a thing that exists as the Judeo-Christian God. There are arguments to that effect, but what philosophers have done is to clarify those arguments and to basically help us understand that you can't argue something into existence, that logic alone is insufficient. David Hume taught us that. So
I know someone that would disagree with you. His name is William Lane Craig, and his favourite argument is the Kalam cosmological argument, which goes. I'm going to get loads of criticism, I know, if I misquote this. Everything that comes into being must have a cause. The universe came into being and therefore must have a cause. And the universe came into being and therefore the universe must have a cause. And I know I daren't look at the comments now because I know I've misquoted it, but the gist of it is that. What William Lane Craig then goes on to say is that cause has to be his particular flavour of God, which I just think that's risible. Even if I accept the first two propositions, which I don't, and then the conclusion, which, okay, I'll grant him all of that, but I don't see how he gets from there to his particular God. Are you familiar with William Lane Craig and the Kalam cosmological argument?
The only familiarity I have with him is that he's a fellow of the Discovery Institute. Beyond that, I've spent no time studying him at all.
Do you think that it would be worthwhile, or is that because you just think there's no point?
Honestly, I think all of the time that he and other people spend debating the existence of God is useless. I think if somebody could have established by now that there is such a thing as an all-powerful, all-knowing God who's looking out for all the little children in the world, I think it would have long ago been done. I'm sorry. I just don't think that's a productive use of my time anyway.
The problem is that you're talking about a matter of pretend.
Mm.
I mean, you meant.
As far as I'm concerned, if there were the kind of God that William Lane Craig believes in, then there are an awful lot of innocent little children who should not be dead. And I'm sorry, that's my position. That kind of God would have both a moral responsibility and the capability of preventing suffering to innocent people. And so my position is that the abundance of evil in the world, and this is just me, okay? And this is how I've resolved it, and why I think there's no point in my debating the question. If there were, William Lane Craig can come up with fancy logical arguments until he's blue in the face, but if there were the kind of God he believes in, then on any given day, when you look at the news and you see horrible things being done to children, those children would not be dead. And so I think that this is why I basically spent no time, studying arguments like that. I think they're a waste of time.
Oh, did you want to come back?
Well, yes, certainly. I mean, she brought up David Hume a couple of moments ago, and he makes a great example of what I face here. I mean, I went into a local church down the street from my house where somebody had put a little sign on my door, on my doorknob, inviting me to a discussion of evolution versus intelligent design. And of course, I go into this church, and what I listen to is somebody from Answers in Genesis giving a 2-hour spiel, none of which is correct, right? All he does is lie to the audience for 2 hours, and the audience absorbed it all. Now, they are not interested in knowing what the facts are. Very often you can get people who admit that these may be what the facts are, but I prefer to believe this. They don't care about truth. And that's really the frustrating thing. How do you affect someone who has neither respect for nor any love for truth? They want to believe what they want to believe, and very often they will tell you this, that they will believe what they want to believe because they want to, or because they need to, or they feel compelled to by their community, what have you. And you can argue the points of fact, and they'll reject them outright. It's just like the Grand Canyon thing. It doesn't matter how they justify it. In the end, the excuses, the explanations don't matter for anything. You can listen to Kent Hovind's son. He explains the same thing going on in his psychology. We don't need science to provide answers. We just have a book that tells us, if you interpret it the way we want to, and regardless of what it actually says, you can just believe whatever you want to believe because you want to believe it, and reject reality. You assume your own existence. You get to choose your reality. And this is what they told me in the church, that you get to choose your own reality. I couldn't get them to understand that it is not truth if it is not true. And if the statements you make in support of your argument are not true, then they are false. They wouldn't accept that. I couldn't get them to understand that the importance of it. The one question about whether there are chairs in the room, I said, okay, let's take a true statement, a statement that is verifiably true or false. Are there chairs in this room? They would not answer that question, except to say, well, David Hume says, no, just answer the question, yes or no. Are there chairs in this room? They would not answer because I was using totalizing statements. You're talking about a philosophy that rejects reality and submits the reality they want. They don't want to know. And the problem is that you very often have people who have a need to believe and those who have instead a desire to understand. And unfortunately, those who have a desire to understand are the minority in this country and certainly in this state. That's why Perry is a presidential favorite.
I'd like to go back, if I may, to a point that Barbara was expressing, because I woke up this morning listening to Radio 4, which is a very good quality radio station in this country, and in particular the Today programme, which is a very well-regarded news programme. The one downside is that at about 8 minutes to 8 every morning, it has what it calls Thought for Today, in which normally some sort of religious person will come on and talk about some issue in current affairs and try and relate it to God and whatever. This morning, I found particularly distasteful microphone Aaron. The reason being that tragically 4 miners died in a mining incident in South Wales. Aaron, microphone. Thank you. They died in the mine they were in was flooded. There was a time when people were desperately trying to rescue them, and there was hope that they may still be alive. Unfortunately, they were not. And this religious person came on and just talked waffle, crap, bollocks. He even quoted Psalms 22, I think it was, about how there's a talk about something deep down, and this sort of like equated to mines. And then he was talking about how these deaths had brought the community together. And I mean, it was just waffle. Now, what was going through my mind was, South America, which country was it where the 32 miners were buried in?
Chile.
Chile, thank you. The Chilean miners, right? Technology, science got them out.
Right.
And what happened when they came out? It's a miracle. Praise the good Lord. 4 miners die in South Wales. Where's God? There's no miracle there. But apparently we can still see the work of God in Psalms 22 and its ability to bring the community together. I'm sorry, I'm totally with you, Barbara. If there is a God, he's one malicious and capricious piece of... I'm sorry, it's a family show. I'll pause there. But that's my point. I'm with you. Why should I even entertain the concept that such an entity should exist? And if it does, why is it praiseworthy?
Well, this is a question that has vexed even a great many very sincere, devout Christians. And I think thoughtful Christians, like the Christians of the kind that I know and that I respect, they understand that there is no good answer to this question. And periodically in my classroom, we come across this particular question, and I use the example of Rabbi Harold Kushner, who wrote a book called something like When Bad Things Happen to Good People. He had a little son who died of progeria, the premature aging disease at the age of 14 years old, which is a horrible thing to happen to a child. This child, toward the end of his life, had to try to sleep standing up because if he tried to lie down, his lungs would collapse. And so the rabbi, his father, being a man of God, realized that he was faced with a terrible quandary, which is a quandary that was understood even by the ancient Greeks. If God is all powerful, then he could have prevented this suffering to an innocent child. If he's all loving, then he had a moral obligation to prevent suffering to an innocent child for whose existence he was responsible. So the rabbi was faced with not being able to continue in his understanding of God in the traditional way as a being that's both all loving and all powerful. Now, if he was going to continue to be a rabbi, a man of God who was responsible for teaching other people, he had to do some revisions in his understanding of God. He could either think of God as all powerful, who had the ability to save his child from this awful death, or a God who was all loving, who had a moral obligation to prevent this kind of suffering where he could, but who did not. And so he just simply made the choice to believe in a God that is all loving but not all powerful. He could not continue as a rabbi believing in a God that was anything less than all loving. You cannot have it both ways. The evil in the world. I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, there was a horrible crime here in Louisiana where the father of a disabled child, a child who had been born with cerebral palsy, killed the child, cut off his head, left it outside on the side of the road for the mother to see as she came home from work, and put various parts of his body in different places around the house. A few weeks before that, there was a little Orthodox Jewish child who'd been walking home from day camp in Brooklyn and who was killed and dismembered by another Orthodox Jew. Now, how do you explain that? In the presence of an all-loving, all-powerful God, these things should not be happening. Now, I realize we're going all serious here on this show, but you did pose the question, and my response is that you cannot have it both ways. And I think the best evidence against the existence of at least the kind of God that most people believe in are episodes like that. There's just no way to reconcile that.
Barbara, I'm not in the slightest bit going to disagree with you. I absolutely concur with everything you say, and don't worry about getting serious. Yes, it was entirely my fault. That said, I noticed the time, and I also noticed, I'm aware of how long the second clip of our pre-recorded interview with Eugenie and yourself lasts for. So I'm going to ask Tony to play this. I don't think it needs an introduction. I think you remember what it is. Tony. Barbara, there's another matter that I'd like to raise with you. As well as being a professor of philosophy, you are also on the board of directors of the NCSE, as we've heard. That, in my view, kind of makes you Eugenie's boss, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, she works for the board.
But even though Dr. Eugenie Scott is currently only a doctor, my research has shown that she was once a professor and actually has 8 honorary degrees. How many honorary degrees have you got, Barbara?
Absolutely none. Eugenie has earned every one of those honorary degrees.
Well, you see, I thought that this would be an interesting way to determine whether a professor is more intelligent than a doctor with 8 honorary degrees. So I've formulated a short quiz to see what the answer is. And if you're both happy to play along with it, we can start on the quiz. Are you happy to participate?
Well, it's your show. I'm not sure we have a lot of choice in the matter. So give us your best or worst, as the case may be.
Okay, well, for you, Eugenie, the first question is in relation to science, which should be your strong point. Between what wavelengths of the electromagnetic spectrum is the human eye capable of seeing?
Well, let's see. Right off the top of my head, I have no idea.
This
is why the good Lord made Google, right? We look stuff like this up. Come on.
I'm sorry. Well, I've got to take the answer on the card, and that is not the answer on the card.
Oh man, I failed.
Similar
shoot too.
Yeah, similar question for Barbara. Barbara, the wavelength of red light is about 650 nanometers. Yes or no? Is red your favorite color?
No.
Correct answer. So 1 point to Barbara.
Wait a minute.
Now,
is this going to get me fired at the end of this?
This is
the end of this program.
We're going to. Well, you might get better points. You never know.
Are you going to give the results of this quiz to the rest of my board members for my next evaluation?
It will remain private between us and the viewers of the charity show.
Right.
When we will take a poll to see whether you should remain in employment. But you've got a doozy one coming. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Well, let's keep going then. Maybe right. I'll do better later.
Yeah. Because actually, the second question is quite tough for Barbara because it's about the Suez Canal. Barbara, which canal, the name of which has 4 letters, the first beginning with S, runs between the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea?
Well, of course, it's the Suez, right?
Well done. 2 points. You've got. It's all right.
I'm going 2 for 2 so far.
Eugenie, I can tell yours is about the Panama Canal. Okay.
All right.
How many vessels passed through the Panama Canal in 2008?
1,429.
That's so way off the mark, and it's not the answer on the card. I'm sorry. 2-0 to Barbara. Question 3 is about American history. First question to Barbara. Prior to President Obama, who was the last American president to have served 2 terms in office?
Well, of course, it was George Bush.
Incredible. Yes, you're right again. For you, Eugenie, in the 2000 presidential election, George Bush won 47.9% of the popular vote, which represented 50,456,002 votes. How many votes did Al Gore get?
More.
Sorry, you've got to be specific.
Approximately 250,000 more.
No, actually, it was over 500,000 more.
Worse yet.
50,999,897.
That just makes me feel worse. You know that? I mean, not just because I blew another question,
That's
but that I didn't
depressing.
remember how big the margin was.
So it's 3-0 to Barbara at the
good.
moment, and there's only 2 questions left. Okay, question 4 is how good you both are at connecting with the youth. And these questions relate to the Harry Potter books, and in particular the first book in the series, written by J.K. Rowling, which was called The Philosopher's Stone. Eugenie, in chapter 1 of The Philosopher's Stone, the first book in the Harry Potter series, we are introduced to the Dursleys. Mr. Dursley is the director of a firm. What is the name of the firm, and what does it make?
I was so hoping you would ask me where they lived, because I could have told you they live in Little Whinging, which I think is an absolutely brilliant name of a town. But where Mr. Dursley works, Vernon Dursley works, where does I do not remember. Can I get partial credit for remembering Little Whinging?
I can only take the answer on the card, I'm afraid.
The card speaks. The card rules.
Barbara.
You going to tell me the answer?
Oh yes, sorry. It was Drummings, and they made drills.
I didn't remember that.
Barbara, your 4th question. What was the title of the first book in the series about Harry Potter, written by J.K. Rowling?
Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
That's the correct answer.
Brilliant.
All right, I'll tell you what we'll do. For the last question, because it's now 4-0, we'll turn the order around. So Barbara will go first on this question.
That'll help.
This one's about... I don't know why you say that, Eugenie. They just took them at random order. Barbara, which Prussian philosopher, whose first name was Immanuel, wrote Critique of Pure Reason?
Oh, everybody knows that was Immanuel Kant.
Absolutely right.
I was hoping that she can't remember.
And look, even my undergrads know that.
Even I knew that one. Your question, Eugenie, your final question.
Right.
It's also on philosophy. It's a little bit longer, though. Bear with me. Imagine that you have been living in Plato's cave, which is a philosophical idea that I'm sure you're familiar with.
Right.
Your only lifetime experience has been watching the shadows of puppets move on the cave wall. But, like Theseus's ship, parts of those puppets have over time been replaced so that none of the original puppets are in fact left. Also, the mountain in which the cave is being taken away 1 grain at a time, so there will come a stage where it is no longer defined as a mountain. But now imagine that the puppeteer is in fact merely a brain in a vat, and a computer is controlling his thoughts, such that he thinks he's a puppeteer creating a shadow on a cave wall, but for someone in a cave. Keeping all that in mind, and everything that I have told you is true, but all Englishmen are liars, how blue is left?
Everybody knows that left is blue and right is red. So
that would
politically speaking, that then blue, it depends on how left your political party is.
That would have been so close had the question been how left is blue, but the question was how blue is left. I can't take it, I'm sorry. The scores at the end of this test are Barbara 5 and Eugenie, not so clever clogs, Scott, 0.
I'm sure that if
what
if
have you got to say?
Well, I just hope that when the viewers of this program write in as to whether or not I should be fired, I hope that the majority of them are not creation science and intelligent design supporters.
Can I thank you both very much for being good sports in that, and hopefully we'll edit it into something that is entertaining. I know, Eugene, that you wanted to appear live on the show, but by reasons of your itinerary, you're not able to do so. I think, actually, whilst this is being broadcast, you may actually be in the skies above me, almost literally. But thank you very much for your support. Barbara, also, I hope to see you live in a few moments' time. Could I just invite you, perhaps, Eugenie, because this will be the last that we see of you, to give a bit of a shout out for the charity itself?
Absolutely. Doctors Without Borders is a fantastic organization. I was so pleased that you asked me to do even this very, very small amount to help support them. I hope that people contribute prodigiously to this podcast, and that they continue to support this excellent organization that does so much good.
Thank you very much. Barbara, did you want to give a shout out now or leave it till the live segment?
Can I do both?
Yes, you can. Yeah, please do.
It's a wonderful organization. I'm the mother of a physician, and I know, it's easy for him to do his job in the United States, where he has all the modern conveniences and very, very little of the danger, although it does get kind of creepy in emergency rooms. But these doctors are trying to do medicine in the most difficult possible circumstances, and they certainly deserve every nickel that people contribute to what they do. So I'm happy to commend both their work and to commend you for doing this benefit for them.
Well, that's very kind, and as I say, this has been recorded about 7 or 8 weeks before the show, so we shall see when we go back live and we start up a poll whether Dr. Eugenie Scott should stay in employment. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you for asking.
Bye.
So there we go. Barbara Forrest whooped Eugenie's ass in the quiz, and there is now a poll up should Eugenie Scott remain in her job, having been so trounced by Barbara. Barbara, what's your opinion? Are you still happy to have her as the head of NCSE?
Oh, look, Jeannie has been there for over 25 years, and I don't think we could have found a better person if we had designed her ourselves. And she's just done a wonderful, wonderful job.
I have to say that I really enjoyed that interview, and both of you were absolutely great sports, and I really appreciate that. I apologise that the sound quality, as it appeared to come over Blog TV, didn't seem to be very good, so it was a bit sketchy, but thank you both very much. And as you said in the recording, you would also like to give a shout out live during the course of the show. Now's your opportunity.
Yes, I want you to know I've already made my donation through your website, and I encourage everybody else to do the same. It's a most worthwhile organization. They do wonderful work with sometimes in very dangerous circumstances, and there are few organizations that are willing to go where Doctors Without Borders goes. So yes, everybody go to DPR's website, make your donation. I've set the example, so everybody do the same.
Yeah, I'd like to throw in that we just broke over 10,000.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes, and I'd also like to mention one other thing. Dr. Forrest, I was very curious about the state of education in Louisiana, in your home realm, what kinds of things you were facing there. I'd like to know about that before you go. If you have anything interesting to talk about there.
Anything interesting to talk about? Well, we still have the Louisiana Science Education Act on the books. There was a repeal effort which failed. There will be another effort next year. I think the problems with education in Louisiana right now is that there is an attack on public education, which is coming from people who don't like public schools. They prefer a corporatized model of education. And I think right now that's as much a threat to education in Louisiana as anything I can think of. The teachers are, I think, going to be squeezed and more, even more. And I think that we are facing probably an all-out assault on the public model of education in Louisiana under the Jindal administration, and I'm very concerned about that.
Let me know if there's anything I can do to help publicize your plight, or anything I can do in assistance with that. Thank you for the donation to Doctors Without Borders for helping us make this over 10,000 so far. I would also like to express that, we were talking about politics and everything. We mentioned Perry a few times, of course. He did this prayer thing a few months ago in Houston, where this was supposed to be, as he put it, his response to various things that are going on. And the non-believer version of a response is more the charity that we're talking about, sending able-bodied assistance, money, medicine, clothing, surgeons to people where it's needed most. That's what we're doing the charity for. I just want to remind you, this is what we think a response is. It's actual action and people really doing things. And thank you for your donations to help out in that endeavor.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I was more than happy to help.
Thank you very much, indeed, Barbara. I would love to keep you on and talk to you more, but I know that our next host is cooking, and I don't want to upset his prep for that. But could I ask everyone in the audience, please, for a huge thumbs up for Barbara, and also the absent Eugenie, but she was here in spirit. Barbara, it's an absolute pleasure, and I hope to catch up with you again soon. Thank you very much indeed.
Bye. Thank you.